One of the most challenging and also complex relationships to make work or to walk away from when it's become unhealthy is the relationship with two fearful avoidants. In working with this attachment style, I've found that there are two common archetypes that are most often drawn together. The first is the adaptive caretaker archetype. And the second is the emotionally turbulent or disruptor archetype. The caretaker tends to over-attune to their partner's needs and wants. They often struggle to express their own needs, and they have this tendency to lose themselves trying to keep the peace in the relationship. And the turbulent type often has this unconscious tendency to test safety through these sort of push and pull behaviors, coming really close and pulling away or breaking up often. They also experience a lot of emotional flooding and have trouble regulating their emotions. And they often have trouble taking care of themselves, whether that be financially or having consistent instability in their careers. These two often find each other because they share a deep sense of wounded familiarity. They both have lived through early trauma and feel a rare sense of being seen and understood by one another. Now, the caretaker is often more consistent with this because they do tend to be the more stable partner, while the turbulent type can see the caretaker in these sort of glimpses that the caretaker then carries with them and holds near and dear. For the caretaker, this relationship meets the need to feel valuable or to be needed, which is often what the caretaker bases their value and their identity on in relationships. And for the turbulent, it offers a relative sense of safety and acceptance because they often carry this innate sense of being bad or wrong somehow, thinking that no one will ever really love them or accept them. They're also magnetized by their opposite qualities, and often qualities that they feel that they lack in themselves. The turbulent craves the caretaker's steadiness or steadfastness, while the caretaker admires the turbulence, emotional expressiveness, and their ability to just say the thing. At their best, they can feel like this yin and yang relationship. But this dynamic often comes with really high highs and really low lows. The highs can feel almost euphoric. It can feel like you're deeply connected, like you're the only two people in the world. It can be really intimate, both in and out of the bedroom, and it can be full of big dreams for the future and a lot of shared possibilities. At their worst, these relationships can feel chaotic and all-consuming. The turbulent partner may withdraw from the connection, they may end things abruptly, or even seek validation or more outside of the relationship. When this happens, the caretaker will often cling even harder, and they do this to their detriment. They'll feel abandoned and betrayed, and this will deepen their attachment to this person. And when they do this, the turbulent, of course, feels smothered and overwhelmed and ultimately loses respect for the caretaker. Over time, the very thing that drew these two people together ends up eroding at the relationship. They become enmeshed together. They end up relying on each other's strengths instead of developing these capacities for themselves. So the caretaker will lose their voice and their boundaries at the expense of trying to preserve this relationship, which is a losing game. And the turbulent will depend on their partner for stability and regulation when the reality is that we all have to learn how to take care of ourselves. We can't depend on our partner for everything. It keeps people stuck repeating old survival strategies rather than growing as individuals, which is what a healthy relationship ultimately supports. So what begins as a relationship that feels healing because these two people can see each other so deeply ends up slowly turning into something that is exhausting and unworkable. And while the turbulent type is often the first to disconnect because they sort of realize that they never learned to regulate or to create stability outside their relationship. And there's a deep fear that comes with that naturally, that they should figure this out and that they're having a hard time doing that in this relationship. And many of my caretaker clients do eventually realize how draining this dynamic is once they start to work through that acute attachment to this person. Whether you're still fighting for this relationship or you're in a place where you're recognizing that this dynamic isn't sustainable, the things that help is for the caretaker to start to work on learning to attune inward, to know their needs, to name their boundaries, and trust that doing so won't drive real love away. The caretaker type is already really good at attuning to other people's needs, but there's a blind spot when it comes to themselves. And for the turbulent, the work is, of course, building that internal capacity, learning to self-regulate, knowing that you can take care of yourself, starting to make that identity shift within yourself. It looks like asking for space without disconnecting and making decisions without leaning entirely on your partner so that you actually build internal confidence and avoid that fear of being dependent on another human being, which ends up taking care of the very fear that fearful avoidants have of being dependent, entirely dependent on another person. I think both of these types can benefit from working with a coach or a therapist depending on the symptoms that this person is experiencing. As someone who used to lean turbulent, somatic therapy was life-changing for me. I recommend it to everyone. It was the reason why I got trained into somatic modalities and why I integrate it into my work. And while it's easy to think that only the emotional ones need therapy, I think caretakers often experience huge shifts through somatic work. If you're in a relationship like this, struggling to stay afloat or knowing something has to change, I encourage you to explore one-on-one coaching. You can do that right up here. My next video, why they left after you helped, also about the fearful avoidant. I think it could be a good complement to this one, so definitely check that out next.